A key component of the MIGNEX qualitative data collection are the key informant interviews. So these are semi-structured interviews, and we're anticipating doing something like 10 to 20 in each research area. Now, that makes it very clear that these can't be very long interviews because we have a limited amount of time. So if we're doing 20 interviews on top of the focus groups and all the other things we're doing, they have to be fairly limited. Still, they are a vital part of the data collection because these are ways of gathering information about the specific developments which are present in the research area. And some of these may be very visible and easy to capture otherwise. Sometimes they might come up very clearly in the focus groups, but sometimes they might not. So the key informant interviews in the different phases of the fieldwork will be different. So the initial ones might be more open and related to the research area. You might cover more of the vast number of themes we have in the theme guide at a more superficial level to gain a better understanding. And then perhaps the latter half of the key informant interviews you do will probably be much more targeted. So you'll realize which types of people, which types of professions, which types of groups you need to reach and speak to be able to understand what is going on and to shed light on the developments in this research area from different perspectives. So who are the key informants? It's important to realize that the key informants in the MIGNEX qualitative data collection are not the most important people in the area. They could be people who don't have important positions, who don't have positions of power. They could be people who somehow are in a place in their life, either due to their family or to their profession, which means that they see and understand the area better than others. So a typical example that you might not think of intuitively when you hear the word key informant would be someone like a fruit stall owner or a cab driver. So people who really have close and intimate connections with a vast array of different types of people in the research area, and who probably know what's usually spoken about, who know what the big things happening are. Those are the sorts of people that might be really, really useful to have as key informants. And of course, also the more sort of usual suspects. So say a doctor or a teacher, or people who, due to their profession, have specific insights into what's going on in the research area. The key informant interviews can also be useful in terms of talking to gatekeepers that you may very often have to speak to anyway. So it's useful to think about how you can make the most of those conversations that you'll have to have anyway in the specific research areas, and to see whether it's possible to make those into key informant interviews. So the key informant interviews are a part of our data, but we don't record them. There's no rule against you recording them as long as the person agrees to, but we're not asking for transcriptions. And in the research area interim report, you'll be asked to write a summary for each of the key informant interviews you do. But the main output of the key informant interview is not that summary. It is actually the insight that you gain, which enables you to be able to write the research area interim report and to fill in the coding skills about the area. Therefore, it is crucial that you know the coding scales, you know the different themes that we're covering in the research area interim report, so that you're able to pick up the different things that come up in the interviews from that. You may want to think about how you want to process the information from the key informant interviews if you don't record them. So discussion amongst the people doing the work together on the way out of that interview, perhaps jotting down some notes if it's part of a long fieldwork day where many things are going to come after, where you might forget some of the things that were said in that key informant interview. Or you may indeed want to see if it's possible to record parts of the interview so that you have them for your own note-taking for later, quite simply. So whether you record or not, a key issue is informed consent here as with the focus group participants. And we use the same type of oral informed consent where you record that the informed consent was given. You'll also notice in the research area interim report that we ask you to tick a box, in a sense, in terms of which type of category the key informants belong to. Now, some of these categories might seem sort of a bit baggy and non-specific, but the point here is to try and make sure that we are reflecting about the different types of key informants we might want to have. So whether they're public sector or private sector, whether they are someone who works for a civil society organization, we need to have women and men, different age groups, etc. But we also don't want to make the information about them identifiable, and very quickly it would be. So this is also the reason why we're trying to keep those categories quite quite vague in a sense, but at the same time working towards the goal of having a variation in what types of key informants we have in a specific research area. You might also find that there's a sort of borderline issue between who you chat with while you're just walking around, hanging out, doing observation, and who becomes a key informant. So there's a sliding slope there in a sense, and I think it's important that, of course, we can learn a lot from general chats, but that as soon as, in a way, we're starting to ask questions that have a specific MIGNEX purpose, we actually do make sure that we have asked the person for informed consent and telling them who we are, what the project is, and making sure that they're able to actually provide that informed consent to us before we proceed. And of course, if they're not willing to do that, then we don't proceed.